Hello, Xandru. Welcome to Collaborative Learning. Today's special is the rise and fall of the German army on the Eastern and Western fronts, Part 3. If you like my work, please give me a like, subscribe to this channel, check the playlists, and support me on Patreon and PayPal. Additional links and information can be found in the description box below. And see the sidebar for a list of the best books and sources on the subject. In parts 1 and 2 we covered the combat dynamics between the German and Red Army in the 1941 and 1942 campaigns. We focused on the decline of German combined arms warfare and the Red Army's military reform to create their next generation combat forces. In 1943, Germany's infantry divisions, after catastrophic losses, transitioned into a mainly defensive force for the remainder of World War II. They never recovered their original capabilities in offensive operations. The Panzer divisions would carry the burden of the attack and will be forever known as the Fire Brigades. These and smaller armored subunits would be shifted all around the world on rail transport to seal off collapses in the front held mostly by the infantry divisions. They would try to save the situation with armored counterattacks. In the winter of 1943, it was these fire brigades that arrived and retook the important city of Kharkov to end the Soviet winter counteroffensive of 1943. The victory of these SS Panzer divisions at Kharkov showed evidence of a transition into a different form. There was a shift toward acquiring as many high-velocity guns, armored self-propelled guns, and expensive heavy tanks as possible without regard to economic efficiency. In the pursuit of superior weapons, both on the battlefield and in area propaganda, the Germans started producing long-barreled Panzer IVs, Tiger tanks, Panther tanks, and self-propelled guns like the Stug 3. While these vehicles provided a very high level of anti-tank power all across the front, this was fundamentally only a one-dimensional change. The Panzer divisions were not raised to the next level in offensive operations. The Panzer division was stuck in the evolutionary dead end, while both the Soviets and Allies had developed countermeasures against his once innovative tactics. The German Air Force was also changing. Much of the fighter element was being sent to combat the Western Allies. The bomber force was suffering from supply shortages, and Operation Citadel will be the final great close air support operation of World War II. This meant that the German ground attack air power was going to decline after they were done. This was very bad for the ground forces, as they needed this flexible source of powerful flying artillery to ensure success in the most serious operations. On the other hand, the Red Army became stronger instead of weaker. The Red Army was no longer a colossus with a feet of clay. The organization and doctrine of Deep Blau emerged all across the Eastern Front in 1943. The production achievement of the Soviet home front, combined with surging Allied Lend-Lease deliveries in vital communications equipment, explosives, and hundreds of thousands of trucks, gave the Soviet Union the ingredients to create a new Red Army. Massive wartime experience and many failures had filtered through Soviet military bureaucracy to translate into wartime reform, changes in training, and reorganization. The Soviet supply chain became much more efficient and robust, and armies and fronts became more sustainable in offensive operations. The ruthless personnel system ensured that Red Army forces were continuously refilled with combat troops despite losses that were often several times that of their enemy. With these reforms in place, the Red Army was now capable of continuous offensives and was converted into a true assault army. The biggest changes was the development of the tank armies and artillery divisions. The tank armies provide the capability to perform long-range offensive operations with hundreds of tanks apiece. 6 were eventually raised. Much of the Red Army's once scattered artillery units were eventually reorganized into dozens of powerful and more effective artillery divisions. These divisions could concentrate hundreds of artillery pieces together with units of multiple rocket launcher systems. The artillery divisions were the superweapons of the Red Army, and were capable of turning cities into apocalyptic wastelands and blasting German defense-in-depth systems into the surface of the moon. They gave Soviet infantry the power to seize ground in a systematic fashion, which altered the combat dynamics of 1943. The final great German offensive of the year was Operation Citadel in July 1943. It aimed at destroying a massive defense in depth in the Kursk Bulge. This was a clash of the titans, as both the Soviets and Germans concentrated extreme combat power in the form of ground and air forces. They extensively planned, rehearsed, and prepared their actions. In particular, the Germans concentrated the lion's share of their panzer divisions on the Eastern Front to make the main effort. As we all know, Kursk would end in another German strategic failure, but despite its defeat, the combat abilities of German combined arms demonstrated a skill level that it was never able to replicate for the rest of the war. In these attack days, well-trained, re-equipped, and battle-hardened panzer divisions attacked the numerous corps next to each other, supported by mass close air support and coordinated by German divisional commanders with their Air Force observer teams. They faced the strongest of Soviet defenses, multiple echelons of defense lines with some of the most extensive minefields and anti-tank defenses of the war. These were also supported by strong Soviet artillery fire, thousands of tanks, and close air support. Spearheaded by heavy armor and combat engineers, the German panzer forces dismantled several lines of defense, inflicted much higher losses on the Soviets. Both sides were very strong on the ground and on the air, but it was clear within days that the Germans did not have the strength to achieve their objectives. Despite inflicting 3 times more casualties, the Soviets and their reserves were too massive in number to get through. It was evident as the offensive went on that the Germans were failing their timetable for the operation. This realization and the sudden Allied landings in Italy resulted in the cancellation of the only great attack of 1943. The German High Command pivoted focus to the Mediterranean front and the Second Front in France. The German army massively expanded with a huge number of newly established combat divisions in 1943. This new growing army building in the west was meant to stop the future Operation Overlord and D-Day. This diversion of resources would have catastrophic consequences on the Eastern Front. With reinforcements cut off from Soviet Russia to feed the beast in the west and the south, the declining German Eastern Army would be trapped in a struggle for survival. Their combat divisions continuously shrank from attrition. Reinforcements were too low to reverse the downward trend in competitive combat capability. Immediately after the Battle of Kursk, the German forces were smashed by the gigantic Soviet summer counteroffensives. The bloody but still formidable German air and ground forces that had been built up for the year shifted to defense and expended their best strength in the air and on the ground. Throughout July and August 1943, the Soviets hammered the German forces with massed artillery, air, tank, and infantry attacks in a relentless and continuous way. The German mass close air power continued to deal damage, but instead of 2,400 close air support sorties a day, losses, shortages, and wear and tear of aircraft dropped the air support to only half the original level by the end of August. It was worse on the ground. The best trained and equipped of the German panzer troops were decimated. In particular, the Soviet operations to seize the Orel salient and the Sea of Kharkov inflicted dreadful damage to the German army and bled them white. The combat strengths of German infantry and tank units plummeted to only a small fraction of their strength prior to the Battle of Kursk. By early September 1943, the Battle of Ukraine was raging. Field Marshal Manstein complained that his Army Group South was struggling to survive. It had only the equivalent of 1 infantry battalion per division. In part 4, we will continue with the life and death struggle in Soviet Russia into the fall of 1943. See you there. Please put your thoughts and ideas in the comment section. They always make a great conversation. I hope you find this special to be informative. Thanks for watching.